right, we'll go ahead and get started. Calling the meeting to order. Everybody turn everything on. Does anyone have any announcements? Nope. Okay. Moving on to public public appearances before the closed session.
On topics related to the closed session.
On topics related to the closed session. And then we will also have a chance to comment on things not on the agenda later on the agenda. So this is just related to closed session. Yes, hello. Yes.
I have one comment.
Oh, it's not? I can hear it.
How's it on?
Yes.
Okay.
One comment about, in watching these, this is an aside. One comment about if something is asked of anyone in the audience, because they have a microphone, because you're watching the video, anybody who's answering a question from the audience can't be heard. So they just have a microphone. So I would like to urge you this evening to not appeal the decision of the PERB board, but more importantly, I would like you to think about how you got to the point where you even are having to have this appeal decided. You know, I'd like you to look into the amount of money that this has cost the public to have done, you know, to get to this point. But more importantly, what kind of decisions were made to say that the 5 people that were in that office, how were they considered confidential employees? I know you had a thought about that, but there were some paper decisions that were also part of that, where there was paperwork that was presented to the PERB board that said that these people actually did confidential work. That was signed by Jamie Anderson, and it was as under penalty of perjury. I don't know why Patrick Peston or Lisa Alfano or our director Sandra Cooper didn't sign this. Instead, they had materials management sign this. But, you know, I really think you need to look at the decision that was made by the PERB board and the information that they had going in, because, you know, I think a lot of public money was wasted doing this. And I think on top of not appealing this, I think you need to examine that. Thank you.
Thank you. And in case I didn't say it, we're limiting comments to 2 minutes.
Nicholas Alva, employed in the Petaluma branch. Very quickly, I wanted to thank the Petaluma Lab and Tim May for being involved in getting the desk reconfigured. I won't be here later. So yes, I also stand in support of the new members and the amount of money that was spent. Morale is somewhat of a memory here, and I feel like the commission is being pulled by the nose while it's paying through its teeth with some political decisions that are totally wrong. If you look at how much staff has given up over the last couple of years in contracts, and look at how much the lawyer has been paid, you're basically asking staff to fund its own disarray. These types of decisions that are going on, and I want to tie it with your decision on the process of an EERP, which is a further fractionalization and a fragmentation of the workforce. Morale is being destroyed. I don't understand how with the EERP you're going to work 2 separate bargaining units other than paying for the lawyer to do 2 separate units to pay more money. I'm so glad that the upstairs has joined the union and is part of the union. It feels like a real step in unifying staff, not against anybody, but being with everybody. So I really would ask you to not vote on going for the EERP.
Thank you. Public comment on the closed session item, excuse me. Any additional public comments? Okay, then at this time we will go into closed session to discuss the closed session item. So are we going, why don't everybody stay here, keep your seat, we're going to go upstairs and then we will come back down. That way nobody else has to move. All right, going back on the record, thank you all very much for your patience. The commission met in closed session. we voted not to appeal the decision of the PERB's, what is the official person? The PERB's official administrator, and we gave direction to our negotiating team. So, moving on. Public appearances. If anybody would like to come up and make a public comment on a excuse me, I went to the dentist today, a non-agenda item, this is the time to do that.
Don't go out the door.
Nobody coming up. We will, Commissioner comments, major information items and lab activities. And I would also ask at this time that Director Cooper introduce
Oh,
our new Elisa,
our
our interim Elisa.
Our interim.
Mark, are you back there?
Oh,
Mark Walsh, whom we're delighted to have as our interim head of budget and finance. He's working 20 hours a week.
thank you very much. And we're going to hear from Mr. Walsh later in the agenda, but just thank you very much. All right, so Commissioner comments, major items, lab activities. Do you want to just start over here with Commissioner Whistler?
Sure. So the Santa Rosa lab met on January 16th, and there was a fair amount of discussion about recruiting new lab members and the best way to go about that, and creating a more formal procedure at the lab for new lab participants, getting more detailed written information packets with responsibilities, library structure, background, et cetera, into the hands of new lab participants. There was also the inquiry about possibility of there was a way to use the library's webpage to recruit people to the lab, as just a suggestion. The branch managers of 3 Santa Rosa libraries were there and gave updates as to various activities going on. There's a lot of great activities, a lot of programs. I'm not going to go through the laundry list, but suffice to say all 3 locations have a lot of different and well-attended activities going on. Volume is up from previous December. There have been a fair amount of staff out sick, so there was having to work around that, but they coped with that. The Friends report, the Friends for Santa Rosa gave the library $36,000 in December, which is fabulous, and they are going to have their big book sale in April at the Vets building. And then finally, there are the digital petting zoo sessions for the public in January and February at the 3 Santa Rosa libraries, which sound like they've been quite well attended.
don't forget to leave your mic on.
First, I wanted to thank Julia for attending the January 2nd Sebastopol Lab meeting as I was out of state, and I hope she had a great time. So I'm working a little bit from the draft minutes I had from...
I was going to give an update on them.
Oh, okay, but were you going to mention the library landscape group?
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's been a committee, not just from the library, but from the community, working on a landscape plan for around the Sebastopol Library as well as City Hall. And this plan, the proposal will be shared at the February 5th Sebastopol City Council meeting. So if anybody's interested in that, it should be very interesting. They're trying to make it sustainable. The Friends of the Library had a children's book sale on December 7th and 8th, and they raised $1,900. They had a January book sale, which I haven't heard how much they gained from that. But we meet next week. The lab is busy looking at ways to solicit feedback from the community, and they are also working on ideas for a public forum. There is a subcommittee that has developed a draft lab handbook, which will be discussed at next week's meeting, so that should be interesting. at Guerneville, they had an election of officers. Peter Andrews has been elected as the chair, and John Schubert is the vice chair. Peter talked about the big read that will happen throughout the library system in March of this year, and the focus of that big read, as many of you probably know, are the poems of Emily Dickinson. So he talked about some of the programs at the Guerneville area in collaboration between the Friends and the library and KRV, KRVC, as well as KGGV, are putting on, and it all sounded really very interesting and very exciting. Jan Gudati,
Guidati.
who has been a long-time library supporter. In fact, I think she first started working with the library in the 1970s. Recently resigned her seat, and she will be sorely missed. She has been a great asset to the library, and I believe that we are going to be doing something
Just
for her later.
realized I don't have the resolution
Oh,
done, but,
we're doing a resolution for her, but they don't meet again until March, so I think we have time.
okay.
Then,
Strike that from the consent agenda.
okay. Interestingly enough, Guerneville's bylaws do not have a limit on the number of library advisory members that they could have. So in addition to filling Jan's vacancy, they talked about adding other positions to the Library Advisory Board. They're particularly interested in making sure that they have representation from the Forestville and the Occidental area. So we're hoping that interested people will apply for that. And I believe we do have 2 applications that will be reviewed and probably on the next meeting here to be approved. They probably will be, they're going to consider having one of their members take over the job as secretary to record the minutes, and they will discuss that further at the next meeting. At the Treasurer's report for the Friends December book sale, they made a total of $3,112, and as of the end of December, the Friends have a balance of about $20,000 in the bank. The 9th annual Readers Theater will begin on Wednesday, January 30th, and this is a program I believe only happens up at Guerneville. Plays by local authors are going to be presented this year, and new this year, there are encore performances on Saturday. So on Saturday, February 2nd, they're going to be having the same play. They also, the Friends also sponsored the 7th annual Young Writers Essay Contest. And the Friends were able to distribute $750 in prize money as well as certificates for participants. The question that the youth were writing on was, if you were elected West County Supervisor, what would your top 3 priorities for the Russian River area be? So as you might imagine, Supervisor Carrillo was very interested in this, and I think, and I'm not sure if it's happened yet, but I believe that he wanted to come and meet the students and read all their essays, and so that's all I have.
Thank you.
Nick already told part of it. Our lab met last Tuesday, and the lab approved up to $25,000 for redoing of the circulation desk. It's been a long process. It's been a process that has involved a lot of staff input. They're currently, I think, they're almost down to finished, except the decision about which direction the tables go. But we have those funds, and they will be the monies will come from those funds for the redoing. And the reason for the redo is for ergonomic. There will be desks that can be adjusted to different heights, and also for the RFID, the ability to work with that. They're also changing a bit the way when people come in and leave books, there will be a sort of a bit of a higher wall, so they can just put the books through a slot, and then they won't stand at the opposite side of the table and wait for service forever. So it's been a good process. It's taken a while, but it's happening. I also found out at the meeting, not officially announced, but our friends have put aside so far $230,000 towards the remodel, eventual possible remodel of the Petaluma branch. I think that's quite impressive. And instead of having petting zoos, which I might just put in as an aside, if you saw the article in the Press Democrat, it's my wife who's in the picture. You would think, anyway, I won't go there.
What was she doing up here and not at Petaluma?
Well, they don't have petting zoo
I
lessons in
see.
Petaluma, but she's up here for Italian every Saturday, so she stopped by. But Petaluma is doing classes in choosing an e-reader instead of e-book petting zoos. We have a lot of sales coming up in February. Second is the children's book. The 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, they're the other book sale for the whatever. Also, just I might mention, if you've been in Petaluma in the last 6 months, our major thoroughfare has had immense construction on it. It's virtually impossible to get across town on that road, and as a result, many of the things in our library have gone down a bit because it's hard to get to the library. The book sales in the bookstore are down and so forth. The youth member of our group suggests that we have a library app, a Sonoma County library app, that will be as we redo the digital. That was a decision she thought would be good. I agree. And then also, they're talking about a possible open house, which would include a presence of the lab for input to celebrate the construction being over, which it isn't yet.
That would be the construction of the road?
Well, there are about 4 construction projects going on.
Okay. And for those who are not familiar, the Petaluma Lab, I believe it's the only lab that actually acts as trustee they have control over some trusts.
Well, we have
Actually,
the
they don't-
control. They have recommendations
Right.
over around close to $2 million worth of trust.
And that is only to be used for
the
Petaluma.
Library. But I think it's important to note that this project is being done with those funds, and so those funds aren't being drawn from other areas of the library. So,
Right.
yes, they are for the benefit of Petaluma.
And I just wanted to clear up people who were confused that the labs would be talking about building and money, because the other labs do not have any such funds that they have recommendations or influence.
They don't have as much. There
Well,
are
one
little
apart.
dribs and drabs.
At our last lab meeting, we met the new city liaison, is our newly elected city council member, David Cook. We have also a library book sale coming up beginning, I think, also next Wednesday. And the Friends have agreed to purchase, I think, about $35,000 worth of furniture.
Thank you.
The Healdsburg lab has not met since last year, so don't have anything to report there, except we have a lot of evening programs. And by the way, Wednesday night of this week, there are 2 outstanding jazz guitarists who will be playing at Healdsburg. If any of you are free and have the opportunity to get up there, I think you'd really enjoy them. The Windsor lab met, and they are preparing a lab questionnaire which is going to be distributed to all of the patrons as they come in. And at the last meeting, we worked on the questions. They have about half a dozen questions that they're going to ask the patrons about their ideas of what better services, what different services the Windsor Library might offer to the patrons. The Lego Club, which I'm not sure if it was started or not at Healdsburg, but it's a big thing going on at Healdsburg, and they've started it at Windsor. And if anyone has any old Legos hanging around your house, please drop them off at either Windsor or Healdsburg. They have large boxes full of them, and kids come in and build the most extraordinary constructions you've ever seen. They also have a thing which I think is fun, which is put up by a bunch of high school kids. They're trying to find out who is the tallest patron of the Windsor. So they have a piece of paper glued to the door, and as you come in, you can go up and you can measure yourself to see how tall you are. We also have a new youth member on the lab, and he'll be voted on tonight.
Thank you. And as Helena mentioned, I did go to the Sebastopol lab. It was a lovely time. It's a very lively group. I was quite impressed with their level of engagement and discourse, and they are actually trying to come up with a formalized procedure by which issues that will be of concern to the public can be relayed from the commission to the lab. The lab can then put that issue out to the public, get feedback, and give the feedback to the commission, which is, I think, the primary purpose of the labs is to keep the flow of information to the public. So I was very excited to see what their efforts were. They were, as I said, trying to formalize it, and they are also doing a handbook which they agreed to share with all the other labs, even though it is not quite finished yet. They've agreed to share their beginning process, which was good. So it was a very interesting and engaging conversation. Okay. And then we get to the committee reports. Ad hoc JPA subcommittee report. The JPA subcommittee met last Friday. They've changed, I've been telling everybody they meet the last Friday of each month, and now, of course, they have changed their schedule. So there is a formal JPA website that the county has put up. There's a new schedule up there. I'm not sure I'm even keyed in yet to what that new schedule is. It's not consistent. It's not at the same date each month. So I encourage everyone to go to the website to look and come to the meetings. They're very interesting. They've changed the schedule a little bit because it's become clear that we're not going to plow through things in quite the time that I think Supervisor McGuire had hoped. And the last meeting, we had a very informative and well-presented PowerPoint, just giving a virtual tour of the libraries so that people could see what they look like and get information about just how large they are, who owns which library branches, etc. We had information in a packet on circulation and all kinds of things like that. And there was a really interesting discussion that got started about equity of service, and it is going to continue at the February meeting. And I would encourage everyone who has anything to say about how they want the library to run in terms of equity of service to come to that meeting and speak, because it is not a given that our current joint powers agreement has equity of service as sort of the heart of its construct. That's not a given for any revision that they're doing, and they are discussing, and I think very practically and intelligently, but there's a big discussion about what that should look like, what service to the library, from the library to the public should look like, and what cities should be allowed to do if they have the finances to offer more than the library system can offer. And I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. Then currently scheduled for March and April are the discussions on governance, which would include the makeup of the commission, I think, and the structure of the governing body and the labs. So those who are interested in those, again, I encourage everyone to come and give voice to your opinion. And both, Tim
I'd
and
like to
Helena are
add
there.
that if you go to the website for the county and go to the Joint Powers Agreement Committee page and look at their minutes and what have you, there is a packet that's there from the last minutes that I think is a really great collection of data about the library. It includes a lot of the reports that we've gotten on the commission. In order to prepare for Sandy's presentation, the committee got a lot of information, and it's probably one of the most condensed places to find a lot. So I just found that really helpful. Well,
Okay.
and the subcommittee did meet, and we met, what day was it? Thursday. And we discussed Well, we talked about the slideshow, and we also talked about issues of equity of service and how to think about that. Anything to add to that?
Okay. Public comment on the JPA Review Committee?
One of the main topics of the meeting was the reduction of service hours, not just the equity of service hours. And you failed to mention that. And also about how people get information, and this is information for the committee. I've been emailing Don Schwartz. The information, like the emails that Guma sent, those do not appear in the packet because there was at the first meeting, there was a email list of interested parties, and that's the only people that get that information. And so I spoke with Don Schwartz and said, or emailed him and informed him of that, and probably be to your advantage to change that so that everybody's getting that information.
Are you saying that the information that gets forwarded doesn't get posted on the website?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. The subcommittee on
Sure.
finance?
Mary Evelyn and Susan and I met with Sandy and were able to meet Mark Walsh and go through the documents that he had been reviewing and working on, and we had a preview of the slideshow about the revenue and the property tax. So I think that we were all very, very pleased with him, and we learned a lot from that short meeting. And we're happy to have him on board to help us with the financial stuff. And he's agreed to meet with the committee monthly to help us understand some of the information that is coming to the commission, and mostly in the interest of saving time, but also it's great to have that second close look at stuff.
Yes, thank you. Comment on the subcommittee report? Okay. Approval of minutes? Can I hear a motion?
So moved.
And, okay, any changes or discussion regarding the,
Well, I did have something I wanted to add. I was going back through old minutes trying to find things, and I would request that the numbering system be put back into the minutes that corresponds with the agenda items, because it's hard to, this is a summary, but it's hard to find stuff when you're trying to look quickly for an item, and to then look at the minutes and then have to go to the video. It would be very helpful to have, like how you have it on the agenda. You have item 10 and then items under it, 10.1. So it'd be great if you could put the numbering back in.
okay? Is that a problem? No. Thank you. Any amendments or further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? Correspondence and press coverage? I don't see that we have any. Oh, okay. We'll move on to the next, the consent calendar. And at this time, we will remove item 9.2 regarding adopting the resolution and try it again next month. So the consent calendar is just item 9.1. Any objection to the consent calendar?
I don't have anything on my consent calendar.
The full one is blank.
Doesn't say anything.
Yours is blank?
Request for an update leave.
Go to go to
Oh, there is a document,
the document.
9. That's right, unpaid leave. But not the 9.2.
Right, 9.2 is being removed, and it will probably show up again next month.
Actually, I don't have it either.
Do you have the agenda item cover?
No,
I have it on mine.
it's okay. I don't have to have it. I'm just
Right. All right.
concerned that it didn't make it into all of it.
Is there any objection to the consent calendar with just item 9.1 on it? Okay.
But I do have a question about 9.2. is, to my knowledge, this is the first time we've done this for something.
It's not the first time, but she actually has had a profound effect on that library and was instrumental in getting the building built. Worked at the library, he's been a volunteer.
I
It
just
was-
wanted,
1970.
this is an exceptional.
This is an exceptional case.
Thank you. All right, moving on to number 10, action items by resolution. And there are none. This is going to be such a fast.
Don't say that.
Oh, sorry.
We're not-
Action items by motion, and we're up to the mid-year budget review and adjustments. You want to start with an overview?
Do you want Mark to start by going through the tax projections so some of this makes sense? And this is just the 12-13, not the 13-14 yet. Yeah, we'll do 13-14 a little later in the.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's on.
No.
There you
Yes?
go.
Okay. Madam Chair and members of the commission, I'm Mark. Can't hear? Neither can I. Can you hear me now? No.
You're broadcasting.
No, now it's off.
Definitely off. What about this?
This work?
Yes.
So maybe now then. No?
I can
Is-
hear you, but
Okay.
apparently
Can you,
members of the
you guys
audience-
can't hear? Okay. All right, great. So we have projections in your packet that you'll see in your budget item number 11.1 is the index number for your agenda. And you'll see that we have some action items that are the result of projections. The first projection we have is the current year tax revenues. And for fiscal year 12-13, you're going to see where there's some very good news. We do have a PowerPoint slide. Sandy, did you say we're not going to go through that at this time, the PowerPoint itself?
The PowerPoint slide, do you want to, we can do it now if you want to.
It would make more sense because they're tied together. There's a good link between the 12-13 projection and the 13-14.
Here, use that one.
I feel like I'm on a talk show if I hold it like that.
That one wasn't working. We'll share.
Oh, thank you very much. Nobody ever asked me to sing twice, so that's why I don't have a lot of experience with microphones. So if you look at, when we go through these projections,
And this is part of the new documents that you got.
and on your agenda packet, your item number 11.1, page 3 is going to have the numbers for fiscal year 12-13 tax revenues. And then the PowerPoint slides are going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do with the numbers on this page. And so I'm referring to this page just so you'll see a couple of the sub-object numbers are the ones on the far left. You'll be able to
And
follow
let me
them
say
easily.
that this new document that has the 13-14 is right there in front of you.
If people
There-
don't have.
If
copies.
people don't have copies, there are copies right there,
Oh, okay, great.
right there. You want to
Does
just
anybody-
hand them back?
Sure. So what we did for walking through the process of projecting these tax revenues, we received the latest estimates from the Auditor Controller's Office of what they intend to distribute for fiscal year 12-13. And the distribution projection to date from the Auditor Controllers is of $14,538,400 that you'll see on your page 3 there, right there
I
at the,
think we're having problems knowing which document you're referring to.
11.1.1.
Okay, you're on 11.1.1,
We're at
which is not
11.1.1,
this one.
page 3 in your agenda item. And you'll see the numbers at the bottom. The projection for taxes to be distributed by the Auditor Controller is $14,538,000. That's the good news this year. And so that is the projection, the beginning projection for the fiscal year 12-13 of the tax revenues that you will receive this year. And I just wanted to bring you to that page so we're all looking at the same numbers. Then we'll walk through the tax projection process that tells you what that means to you in 12-13 and then potentially 13-14. I'll show you how I'm preparing those projections, and that'll prepare your commission for discussion of projections, what you think we're looking at when coming to 13-14, and put everybody on the same page how we got to this biggest number that drives your budget. So the one thing we wanted to do is project the biggest numbers first to make sure you're okay for this year, and then begin modeling those for next year. So the first thing we're going to start with is the property taxes. Now if we can get to that PowerPoint, we'll walk through the process. Next slide. So what we're doing in projecting these numbers is we're beginning with the auditor's mid-year estimate of what you're going to get in 12-13. As you've already seen, that's $14,538,000. Then what we do is we reduce that estimate for one-time distributions that are unlikely to be repeated in 13-14. So the biggest one's going to be the RDA asset distribution. That's your sub-object 1018, or 1018. It's in your packet, and you'll see that on the next slide. Well, we're gonna go ahead and reduce it by that one-time amount. Then the next thing we do, if we look to the revenue estimates and we say, what's the highly variable line item in these tax receipts that may change for next year? And that item is an RDA distribution from their fund, from the RDA distributions fund, because there's still monies in there that may be claimed, may be distributed, but they're going to be highly variable until all the taxing agencies receive more mature distributions from the RDAs. So there's a lot of fighting back and forth between successor agencies for these RDAs and the State Department of Finance as to what they can spend these monies on and what they can't. So you'll hear a lot about the definitions of responsible obligations. Also going to see administrative charges. It could be accounting fees, audit fees, and I don't know what other costs are actually being allowed in there. So those distributions, and you'll look at those, will be sub-object 1017. That money we think is going to be good news for a long time. We just don't know how much good news it's going to be. So what will happen is those distributions, I think, will vary a lot for a couple of years. So 12, 13, 14, you'll see some variability in there. By the time you get to 14, 15, and 15, 16, it should be as smooth as other revenues. Exception may be if there are enforceable obligations, like debt service payments on things that RDAs did, and those payments themselves are lumpy, you could see some variations in those revenues. So for this coming year, what I did is I discounted those distributions that I called highly variable by 25%. So I didn't want to be too stingy, and I didn't want to be too conservative. And so I just guessed 25% would be a good number, and I put that down. There's also some distributions to go for both those accounts. Sub-object 1018, which represents the final asset distributions from the RDAs being dissolved, and then 1017, which again, that's the amount that's going to continue. But the Auditor Controller's Office doesn't know how much those are going to be or how to estimate those. So if there's asset distributions to go, they shouldn't be that big. And if there's more in 101, it would be just clean up. They weren't able to tell me what those amounts were, so I'd left those out of your projections for both the current year revenue, and they don't fit in the projections for 13, 14 either. So then and that's, exclude the distributions to go from the RDA. So I don't know what those are, so they're not in there. Then there's also the next bullet down says we're going to exclude the potential mid-year AB8 adjustments. Actually, that's Prop 8. I meant to say not AB8. AB8 is about the percentage of the pie. Prop 8 is when a taxpayer says, I think my assessed value is too high. I want you to lower it. And we didn't include any impacts from potential adjustments for that to go this year. And then we also did not add in any supplemental collections. Remember in the good old days when values used to rise, and if somebody bought a house mid-year, they would get a supplemental bill. That would be bad news for the buyer and good news for the local agencies. So for those type of items, we just kept that estimate at flat, 0. So then we took all that new, added it up, and we decided that we're going to use the county's growth rate. They're projecting 0.75%. That's what I'm hearing from the analysts now. I spoke with both the expert in charge of property tax distributions and our county administrative analyst. And they're using 0.75% growth on 12-13 actuals. Then what I intend to do is visit this estimate as the county goes through their policy workshops, as the assessor's information for the coming year matures. That's when they work through their Prop 8 adjustments. That's when they see the supplementals, and they get a good handle on what their role is going to look like for fiscal year 13-14. So they're actually going to hand a roll to the auditor's office for fiscal year 13-14. They have not done that yet. So what we'll do is we'll keep our eye on what that looks like, and that 0.75% may change. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. So we'll need to revisit that estimate probably around when the Board of Supervisors does their policy workshop. And also I want to let you know we're in the same, we have the same tax rate area as the county. So using their assumptions and estimates is probably a good way to go. So we're just going to be consistent with them, probably follow them, and the logic on what's going up or down, what the assessor sees, is a lot like what we will see. And then finally, we compared the estimates on a budget by budget basis to what we're dealing with last year, so you can see, to what extent you have good news on a budgetary basis. And then, of course, we'll also look at that on a budget actual basis as well. Next slide, please. So then you'll see that's how I got there. We started with the good news for this year on top, and then see that two reductions. One is I took 25% of what we think will be the continuing distribution, sub-object 1017, and that was the total of that amount was $213,175 bucks. We took 25% of that off. I pulled out the entire amount of the asset distribution because we don't think that's going to be repeated, and we netted it. And I'm calling that net number the baseline. That's the $14,112,550. I added 0.75% to that to get your new amount, the $14,218,000 that we would project, and that's your beginning projection before you do your proposed budget for fiscal year 13-14. Then we went and compared that amount to, next slide please. You'll see where we compared that amount to what's budgeted. So this year we're projecting for 12-13, $14.5 million. You had budgeted $13,974,000. So the extent of the good news is $564,000. I just want to slow down and be a little careful there. That number includes property taxes. It also includes a couple sub-objects that aren't in the 1000 series that you consider your property tax numbers. One is the homeowner's property tax relief, and that's what the acronym is HOPTR, and you'll find that in your packet, and that's let's see, that's sub-object 2440. So that's included in that number there. The other is your NCPA government services fee, and that's your account number 3019. I put both those in there because they tend to act like taxes, and they're all distributed by the tax collector. Then I if you're looking further down on that slide, we took your coming year's projection, that's your preliminary projection, compared it with the prior year's budgeted, and that's again the $13,974,000. And you'll see that on a budget-to-budget basis, you're to the good by almost $250,000. So that's the tax projection that we have in front of you. And I think it's our most important projection during the year. We probably want to revisit it as we get new estimates from the assessor as they get further along in their process at the county. And at that point, I think it'd be prudent if I open it up to see if you have questions.
Let's go around. You have questions?
The 500, so the increase available for this year, basically, is 564,
Yes.
564,000. And you're saying, I just want to be sure I understand this, that's this year basically only, and you're saying that next year that would be an increase of 247,000 is projected, right?
Yes, that this year, the good news this year is 564. Next year on a budget-to-budget basis, it's 244,000.
Okay. So it's about 300,000, 250,000, that's like basically one-time onlys.
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you look at your page 3 of your agenda item 11.1.1, or the document number 11.1.1,
Right.
and if you go over to the third column of numbers, it's titled Over Under.
Right.
What you'll look to is an account in sub-object 1018. That's the 372,000. All that asset distribution number, none of that was anticipated when you built your budget.
Okay.
So almost all that good news is related in some way to the RDA.
And that is not anticipated to be there next year.
Some of that will and some won't. So thank you very much for the clarification. So 017, I anticipate 3/4 of that to be there next year. And the only reason I didn't anticipate all of it is because these numbers are going to vary, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. So I trimmed that estimate to make it conservative.
But the 372,590 was a one-time only, and we don't anticipate that in the next year's budget.
That's correct. I don't anticipate any of that for next year.
And just for my clarification again, I think I know RDA is Redevelopment Agency.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Susan? Questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Nice news.
Is there anything?
Do you want me to?
Did you want me to walk these through, or do you want to do that? Either
I can do that. You mean the,
the rest of the agenda item? for
Yeah.
the budgetary adjustments? Okay.
starting on the agenda cover sheet, these are the summary. This summarizes what's shown on the spreadsheet 11.1.2. Really need to look at them together. First of all, we're adding back, as we had said, the savings from 11.12 operating budget. That's the 452,690. Then this is where, I'm on the agenda cover sheet. This.
Okay.
They tie into each other, but maybe it's easier to
Okay.
look at it just. Then the increase in tax revenue, and the only reason that it doesn't add up to 564,000 is that I'm using the sub-objects so that Hopter and the NCPA service falls under the sub-object areas for those two. So we have the tax revenue increase by 560,168. Then we have intergovernmental revenue. There's the grant that you approved last time, the $40,000 open source. Then Hopter is a decrease of $3,197, which means that character intergovernmental relations will be reduced by $36,803. Charges for service decreased by $30,714. That includes the decrease in the NCPA government services fee. Plus, we're recommending decreasing the fine revenue by $30,000 based on the amounts that are coming in. Then we're recommending an increase in salary and benefits. $40,000 is from the grant. A major item in here is a recommendation that we increase extra help expenditures by $80,000 that will be apportioned out to the branches for short-term substitutes. So salaries and benefits would be increased by $120,000. Then we have a net decrease under services and supplies of $12,500. That starts with an increase in legal services of $75,000 to cover our commitments plus anything for county council. We're decreasing maintenance for IT equipment because we had a credit for this year by $32,500. Decreased postage because we're not doing the newsletter anymore by $20,000. Decreased printing for the same reason by 10. Decreased library equipment by 15, and we believe we can decrease the utilities by 10. So that leaves us with a net decrease in services and supplies of $12,500.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
Did not, in my memory, we already accounted for the decrease in postage and the decrease in printing by not funding the newsletter this year. Is that not correct?
It hadn't been decreased in the budget. So that's why we can decrease it, because the foundation's now doing the entire amount. But the budget amount had not been decreased. So those are the changes we're proposing in the mid-year adjustments. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
The 80,000 for extra help, how is that going to be allocated?
We have a formula that Kathy and Keo worked up that we use to allocate it out based on number of staff and workload factors and some things like that.
But people can be sick now.
Yes, as long as they don't exceed the allocation for their branch. Yeah. Actually, we've already begun to see the flu.
And take the vacations.
Right. So this is presented for action.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Well, I would just say that I'm obviously pleased to see that we have the extra revenue, but I think even more so, I think it's very appropriate that, you know, one of the key things we do immediately is to help get more extra help and relieve some of the staff pressures. That seems like a very appropriate step.
Further discussion? Okay. Public comment?
About the legal fees. It says here, I thought at the December meeting you approved 60,000 in legal fees. This says 75,000. I actually added up from the general ledger from Lieber Cassidy Whitmore for May to December, and so far you're up to 70,000, and there's still several invoices that are not accounted for. And I'm not sure how that jives with your figures there. I would hope to hear more discussion about how you plan to spend this windfall, the newest windfall.
Thank you.
Do you want me to try to explain?
Let me just, without going into too much detail, my memory of the Liebert Cassidy, we authorized a new contract not to exceed 60,000 from here to the end of the new contract.
To the end of the fiscal year.
Excuse me, and my understanding is that's been implemented. There are also fees from County Council's office. County Council does not work for free. We pay for them, and we are using County Council for some of the lease negotiations and for advice in terms of the Joint Powers Agreement Review Committee, and so we have money in there. Legal expenses covers County Council as well as Lieber Cassidy.
Ben, one more question. The contract from May to December for 47.5. What about the other 27.5? What, I mean, where does that come from? Where do you include that?
I don't understand your question, and
You
again,
had
I don't
you had a
necessarily-
contract with Lieber Cassidy Whitmore from May to December.
Right,
It was for $47,500.
right.
You've exceeded that contract by over $30,000.
Why we revised and have a new contract.
So is the money in the new contract, is that included in the new contract? That money that's over?
Yeah.
Yes. Any additional public comment?
Can you hear me? On the page, I don't know what page this is, where it says add savings from fiscal year 11-12, $452,690. Is that the windfall savings that we had at the end of fiscal year last year? And then it says tax revenue increased by $560,168. So the combined savings from last fiscal year and the additional revenue from this fiscal year add up to about $1 million. And I wanted to have some input at the March All Lab Conclave. I asked you if the public would be allowed to have some input into reopening the libraries on Monday when money became available, when the economy improved and revenues started coming in. And you said to me, yes. And I'd like to know when that's going to be put on the agenda, the question of using the additional money to reopen the libraries on Monday to meet the public demand. Also, several years ago when the economy went downhill and property taxes went downhill, you, the commissioners, asked us, the staff of the library, to voluntarily give up our cost of living increases and other benefits to chip in, to do our part to help the library. And we did. And we did it gladly. It's been several years now. The staff has not received a cost of living increase in several years. Some of the people you employ are probably at the poverty level, don't earn a living wage. The union has been asking in contract negotiations for a cost of living increase to address that, or to redress the fact that staff gave up money
Thank
to
you.
help
I'm
the
sorry,
library.
but your time is up. Thank you. And let me just say that it is not appropriate for us to comment at this point when the negotiations are continuing. So, but in terms of the question of when the public will be allowed to comment, we're having budget meetings in February and March. That is a very appropriate time for the public to come and talk about what they would like to see the priorities be at that point. I have no doubt we will have a detailed and lively discussion about what the priorities need to be, as money, hopefully the economy gets stronger and money comes back, there will also probably be a discussion about, I would anticipate what money is coming back that we can actually count on and what was a windfall and what is something reliable enough to start adding back in ongoing expenses. But the February and March meetings would be when I would encourage everyone to come and have that discussion.
About half of that,
Not specifically, but certainly the priorities of what to do with that money will be on the agenda and discussions about what the public would like to see done. And I imagine that there will be members of the public with reopening the library on Mondays being their top priority for that money.
I just want to be clear that part of that 452,000 was not windfall. It was money that we managed to save because in salary savings, because we had two major positions that were open most of the year, and the rest of the savings were in services and supplies.
And
So-
have those positions been filled?
Yes.
Additional public comment?
It has.
One thing that I would like to speak about is the extra help budget. I have some concerns about how it's currently being used. Mark Walsh is an excellent addition to the interim, and I know that I've met him personally, and he's a very nice gentleman, and thank you for being here. We're all very happy. I do understand, though, that his current salary is coming out of the extra help budget. So therefore, the additional funding being added is that to offset. That's what it says in the contract.
I
So-
know it is, but his is a long-term, it's a long-term extra help, which comes.
Is
it's
that a different
Yes,
budget?
that's a different portion of the extra help budget from the short-term help that we're putting the 80,000 in,
Okay, so.
that we allocate to the branches.
Okay, that's kind of confusing to me. I mean,
If
to
you
me, it
live with
seems
the
like.
extra help budget as much as we do, it might not be, but
No, it just seems very confusing. You either have extra help or you don't, and why you have to term one thing and one another. I mean, it's all the same pot, so to speak. So I just find it a very odd way of accounting for extra help. And I just wondered why we weren't using the empty position, because there must be calculated into the budget the savings from that position being empty, like we had savings, like you just said, for two positions last year. And this is a very high-level position that's empty, and one of the higher paid positions since it was a management position.
Nancy, it will show up in salary
Time's up.
savings, which will balance out in, I mean, the salary savings and the extra help for long-term extra help interact.
I think the short answer to your question is it's not coming out of the 80,000. That extra help is anticipated for the branches to help fill in for workers there.
Short-term.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
and just so we can speak to that, we did try to make it so it would even out with the rate. So the pay rate was about $50, and then with the 30% benefits load. And I know it's a generous hourly rate, and I appreciate it. And it's less than what I bill some clients, but I really do think we're balancing out within the position itself, regardless of where it's charged. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Okay. Any additional discussion on the commission? All in favor of approving all in favor of the motion to approve the adjusted fiscal year 12-13 budget? Aye. Any opposed? then the next action
Thank you,
item
Mark.
is... Thank you very much.
I think you covered the 13-14 piece too, right?
Okay. Does that mean that last item?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're even further ahead than you thought.
Love that. The next item is approval for a date change for the April meeting. The regularly scheduled meeting comes on a library holiday, so we're pushing it 1 week. Do I hear a motion?
I move we change the date.
Second? Okay. Discussion?
What's the holiday?
Caesar Chavez.
The holiday is Cesar Chavez birthday, I think.
Yes.
Public comment? Okay, all in favor of changing the date? Any opposed? No. All right. All right, we are on to the management report. You want to give us the highlight?
Well, on focus and finish, I'm happy to answer questions.
I don't know whether it's exactly on focus and finish, but I don't know that I could have asked it during the minutes. Have we, Will recommended the buying of the asset?
We haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
Although it's still on, we are discussing it and we know which system we'll buy. We just haven't done it.
Do we have picked the system though?
I think so. Mark, we're talking about the asset tracking software. Aren't we intending to buy it?
Yep.
Very simple software with the, as far as software cost goes, relatively nominal cost. It's $1,000. And what we're going to do is just load it with our current fixed assets that show up in your audited financial reports. It's not going to actually manage your capital assets for you. It's just going to give you a very good beginning list of what you have. And then that then would help us, it gives us a starting point for figuring out how you want to do your capital budgeting in the future, which would be a bigger conversation. I just want to make sure that people know what it will and won't do. It's just going to give you a decent start for your fixed asset listing and more or less an accounting vehicle. As far as managing what you do with your capital assets in the future is going to be very limited there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if this is specifically called out in focus and finish, but I think this is the appropriate place to ask, and that is the all-county lab meeting we had last year was very well received, and I was wondering if we have a date for when
No,
we're
we don't. I've been trying to get to that one. It's on
Okay.
my,
And I'm
It's right
thinking, I thought we were thinking like April or May,
May.
that kind of a time frame. Okay.
and I'm going to try for Roanoke Park since that's the roomiest building.
I would encourage us to get a date on the calendar so people can get on their schedules. It really seemed like quite a positive, well-received last year. And some of the items discussed at the beginning that Sebastopol was working on or some of the other labs are working on could be leveraged and shared at that meeting.
I would agree with that.
I had a question on 1.8.1, the phone system. We've heard recently that there's still significant problems with it. So I wanted to check in with you about that to find out what's happening.
Well, some of the problems, one of the frustrations is getting the specific problems reported. So I spoke with Keo and Denise today about setting up a more systematic approach to getting the branches to actually report the specifics of the problems they're having so we can see about fixing them.
Is the public having a hard time calling in?
Unless we get specifics from the staff out in the field, we're answering the phone and talking to the public, we don't know. And so the breakdown, the frustration that we are having is unless we can get regular, specific reports of what's happening, we can't get them fixed. But we discussed trying to set up a more systematic approach to doing that, and they'll be going out, probably going out to the branches to sit down and talk with the branch staff more about what we need from them in order to identify what the problems are.
What is happening now in terms of reporting? How is it happening at all?
It is, it's sort of haphazard. Some people call Carrie, some people call David Lytle, some people do help requests. But we're going to set up a system that allows us to know exactly what's happening and also to allow us to track and make sure that the problems are resolved.
So if the public has a hard time getting in, how would we know about that?
Well, most of them will tell their staff that when they do get through, that they had problems. And one of the things we have to do is coach staff on what kinds of questions they need to ask so they can find out what the problem was. Mary Evelyn had trouble getting me last week. It turns out it was because she didn't know that there was an added one on I had a slightly different extension. And we talked today about ways to deal with those kinds of problems too. We're reinstating the directory, which we had taken out at Central, so you can ask, get the correct extension, and we're also investigating whether we can have a message that tells people that the number they've dialed is an invalid number, because they get caught in a loop right now, which they find frustrating. So those are some of the steps we talked about today based on what I heard on Friday about the sucky phone system. Thank you, Mr. Popnut. But we do need help from staff in trying to be very clear about what the problems are, or we can't fix them.
Sandy, I have just sort of a general question. There are a couple of things here where Elisa was the lead manager. Who's taking over those?
On the financial management system, Mark and I are having some discussions about that, and it turns out that the county is instituting some approach to program budgeting for the next year, and we're supposed to meet with them on Thursday to find out more about that. So some of that may proceed. Right off the top of my head. Oh, the reconfiguration of the staff workspace, Jamie's doing that. Jamie and facilities. Jamie's supervising facilities.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Well, I had questions in terms of, I think it's important that we get the special revenue fund gifts and donations that Elise was working on back on track, and I am assuming no one's working on that right now?
Not yet, although that's on the list of things that we've discussed with Mark, that Will and I have discussed that need attention.
And the other thing that I think needs to maybe elbow its way to the front is the purchasing policy that we had discussed in response to the grand jury report that we were going to be working on.
Those were purchasing procedures.
Clarifying purchasing procedures and who would make the decisions and how the purchasing would be done. But I think that is something that does reach the branches and affects a larger group of people, and something that is confusing to friends when they want to donate money. And
Now that's outside those are two different things. I don't want to
Okay.
quibble.
I don't want to quibble either. I just want
We've
to.
given the branch managers draft procedures on how they're expected to handle their friends' purchases.
Okay. And internal purchasing?
We have a
procedure,
policy on that,
but we have a procedure in place?
yes.
So then what is the purchasing under the policy priorities on attachment A? What is that referring to then? Because I'm confused.
There was some confusion on the part, we have two policies. We have one that defines levels of authority for approval.
And which is this one?
You're going to have to tell me which number it is. 'cause
Well,
I can't-
attachment A on the after you go through your
Purchasing, that was one, Elisa was having difficulty understanding, that we were talking about purchasing and not, paying bills, because it's a long story. But, that's the delegation of authority purchasing, and we can look at it one of these times. It simply says, division managers can approve purchases of up to $5,000, and then I can approve purchases between 5 and 50, between 25 and 50. Those purchases have to be reported. Any purchase decision over 50,000 has to have commission approval. And the issue was some confusion about the difference between purchasing and paying for a purchase.
But when it says these are policy priorities, and it says that this is a policy P 2012, it is a priority for 2012, I think that kind of is a red flag to the commission that these are kind of outstanding items that need to be taken care of. So,
Well, I don't think that one's going to be taken care of before the end of February, but it'll end up back on the list.
but that is like an overall general, at what level, what value something is. So it's kind of straightforward. Like at this, it should go to this, and this it should go to the commission.
Right, it's very straightforward. But Elisa was having some difficulty understanding it. One of the things that caused confusion, Helena, was that for decades, the commission approved things after they were purchased when we had a bill to pay. And when we passed this policy, when the commission adopted this policy about 3 years ago, it shifted the focus from paying the bill to actually making the purchase. Because, you can't really not pay the bill after the purchase has been made. And they're,
That debt ceiling.
yes, yes.
So all of these procedures under Elisa's
Policies.
policies are things that she was assigned to, because they were
Yes.
just blank. So those were all Elisa's.
Right. Up at the top, it's ASD Elisa Alfano. You'll see across the top there.
And our timeline for replacing her is within the second month of the new calendar year?
No.
Budget year?
Our goal would be to have somebody on board by July who could overlap with Mark in July and August while they close out the current fiscal year.
Okay.
Has the position been
No.
defined and posted?
No,
No.
it's too early to post it.
Okay. You'll let us know when that happens?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me on focus and finish?
I have a question about how's scoping going?
It continues.
Is it beneficial? Is it working? Is it?
Yes. Please, if you have to respond, come to a microphone.
Yeah, we've been doing scoping for moving on a year so far. I think we started last May. It has balanced out the some of the side effects on our benefits. Really, it pulls the books that have circulated, have the last checkout date the farthest back in time before it goes. If they're sorry, I'm
Dusty books.
the dusty books. Thank you. I'm a little sick, so my mind's a little foggy. Yes, it pulls the dusty books off the shelf and gets them back in circulation as part of the algorithm as it's getting the stuff in transit to fill holes at other branches. It still holds true that Tuesdays and Wednesdays are our heaviest days, that they're pulling the whole shelf. And then throughout the week it settles down, so to speak. So, but it's working as expected, and so we haven't had any problems.
I know that having gone to the Rohnert Park Lab a couple of times now, they're very concerned about the amount of books that get shoveled around the system. They're, and I'm just wanting to be sure that we're doing something, I mean, that we're continuing to narrow that numbers down.
Well, I think they also have to remember that that's fundamental to the way the system operates.
I know that. I'm just, yeah.
Well, one of the other projects starting with some of our adult audiobooks, VOCDs, is the floating collections as a measure to help with the transit to and fro.
You want to explain what a floating collection would do?
Sure. What a floating collection will do is if a book is checked out and returned if an audio CD book is checked out at another branch, say it's checked out here but returned in Rohnert Park, then it's going to live in Rohnert Park. That becomes its new home, so to speak, until the next person checks it out. And if they check it in Petaluma, that becomes its home. So you have less interbranch transportation of those materials. So that's what a floating collection does.
So the things don't go back to where they came from.
Correct. The only reason that for a floating collection, the only reason a book would go elsewhere once it's checked in is if there was a hold request on that item. Otherwise, it would sit on the shelf. And we're going to be starting that in a couple weeks. Yeah. Lakermen are excluded from the floating collection, so those would go home and ours would come back.
I have one more thing. In the focus and finish, we have, I think it's number 4, goal number 4.
Yes.
I think it's important, I don't know that we've actually said it at a commission meeting. I know you spoke about it at the JPA meeting on last Friday, that we are starting to look towards number 4, the idea of developing a strategic plan, a new strategic plan. I have a copy of the old one here if anybody wants to see it. That's one of the things that we're hoping to move forward on, to start looking towards where we're going rather than floating or treading water where we are.
Well, and it's aimed at setting priorities to try to, among other things, cope with the many demands for the dollars as they start to come back.
Right. But that instead of this just being empty, our hope is that soon this will start having parts to it.
All right, let's move on to monthly activities. Any questions or comments on monthly activities? We'll take public comment on the entire management report at the end. Any discussion on the monthly activities report? Okay. Any discussion on the monthly status report, the performance management? I just wanted to say kudos to Jamie Anderson, who managed to get all of her work plans done with 9 employees. I'm happy to see the numbers coming up and people are focusing on it a little bit more, it looks like. Hopefully, the extra help we just authorized will help loosen up some time for people to do that. Any discussion on that? All right, I'm going to move us along to the monthly financial report.
Well,
We're going to take public comment on the report.
okay.
All right, discussion on the monthly financial report. I had some questions. Maybe I didn't.
I have one while you're waiting.
Yes, please.
It's on the first page, I guess, of 1214, line 6517. Is it already done?
You're in the expenditures,
Expenditures, yeah.
branch networking.
Right, 136% of the budget's
Right.
already spent.
Right.
Where's the 36% coming from?
Elsewhere in services and supplies, although it's a high
Percent.
percent, it's not very much money, I believe. It's, how much is it? It's dealt with on the front. But we have money elsewhere in the IT budget that'll cover that.
From the IT budget.
Any additional discussion, questions on the monthly financial report?
Did you find the change?
All right,
I do.
yes?
Salaries and benefits, this is just confusion to me, but on salaries and benefits, there's a $90,000 in parentheses, which means it's less. There's $90,000, I guess, that.
What sub-object?
It's between 5940 and.
That's the bottom line. So
Yeah.
far, that means that we're $90,000 under budget
Okay,
today.
and is that partly because of a lease, or why are we $90,000 in?
I can't break it all the way down, but I'd have to go through it. Some of it's salaries and savings and salaries and benefits. Looks like that's where the bulk of it is.
Okay.
Let me see. The
We-
thing you have to check is to see is whether the payroll and the yeah, we were at 50% of the year and 50% of payroll. So sometimes there's a lag in
Right.
payroll.
Mark?
So if you look, Tim, there's savings all the way down. We're
Mhm.
under budget all the way down. And I can't tell you all the reasons that we are at this point.
you
Mark's
know?
standing up.
I wasn't sure if you wanted a conversation on how we projected payroll. But we did look at the payroll projection from an overall perspective. And the amount that you're seeing is the aggregate of all these payrolls so far. All this spreadsheet really does, it took the prior 13 pay periods and acted exactly as if they repeated themselves again. So I wanted to explain a little bit of the work that finance did. So we did the same straight line method, and then we also took the most recent 5 pay periods, we averaged those and we applied them. You've got 13 payrolls to go from starting January 1st to the end of this fiscal year. We projected those out, and we saw a savings in there as well. Then we did the same thing on a straight line basis. And then the things get a little more complicated because you've got some merit increases to go for folks that haven't hit step 9. So that number is going to vary anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000. So we looked at payroll a few different ways. We saw there's a potential to save between $180,000 and $240,000. Then when you add in the merit increases of about $30,000 to $60,000 that may occur during the year, that would pull back from those numbers. So considering how large your payroll budget is at $11,264,000, we thought it's pretty close. So we did not recommend an adjustment to that, but for the grant funded positions and the extra help that you already saw in your packet. So I just want to explain what we did. We looked at it a few different ways. As a team, we thought, yes, there's some savings, but it's pretty close, and then there's things to go. I just want to explain how it does hit your packet. It's almost as if we're saying what happened the first half of the year is going to repeat again. And that's because this worksheet's just a straight pull from the auditor's records and a straight projection for you. But I want to let you know we do look at it a couple different ways. We saw savings as you do. We just didn't see them big enough that we would recommend adjustment to your budget.
Thank you. Did that answer your question?
Did.
Additional questions? Okay. Questions and discussion on the quarterly special revenue funds report. No questions? Ready? And then questions or discussion on the quarterly gifts and donations report. I do have a question on this because I think I don't know how to read it. I looked at the second quarter. I believe the foundation has given some money, and that is,
It was given in the first, that's just what happened in October, November, December. Turn it over for the first 6 months, there's 31,235 that's come from the foundation.
okay. I have this recollection of the foundation approving, I think it was 20,000 for ebooks in October.
Keo, can you hear this?
Has that not been given yet?
You need to come over to the,
Ask a question about money that the foundation had given us in last fiscal year, or was it 2 fiscal years ago, that was targeted for a product called Collection HQ, which we are still evaluating, but maybe leaning further away from the purchase of. That money, the foundation did authorize us to reallocate it and use for ebooks, but I believe you're correct that they did also give an additional amount for ebooks.
They did. At
I believe
either
so.
October or November meeting, we voted on it. So does this, I guess my question is, does this sheet only show what's actually been given or what's been?
it's been given.
Okay, so I will check and make sure.
We will check.
That was my question. Anybody else? Okay. Then I will open it up for public comment on the management report.
Doesn't have a current strategic plan. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you mentioned the library doesn't have a current strategic plan. It seems to me the strategic plan for a public library should include making the libraries as accessible to the public as possible. I was thinking about what you said, that if the public wanted to have their libraries open on Monday, they should come to the Library Commission budget meeting in March and ask that the libraries be open on Monday. I think that's outrageous. 97% of the revenue for this library, the Sonoma County Public Library, comes from the public. The idea that they have to keep coming to you, the commission, and asking over and over and over that the libraries be opened on Monday is outrageous. But you're saying if they ask, you will give it priority. You received a stack of 1,000 letters when the library closed asking you to please reopen the library on Monday. The stack, where are those letters now? You received a petition of 4,000 or 5,000 signatures that were collected by members of SOCASOL, Sonoma County Save Our Libraries, asking that the libraries be open on Monday. Where is that petition? Did you answer the requests of those 5,000 people? How many people have to come and ask you to open their libraries before you will listen.
Any additional comments?
Hi, I just wanted to address the VoIP system by Jive. I know, we laugh about the Jive part because it doesn't quite jive. I have the opportunity to work the switchboard a lot, and especially a lot lately, and there is a lot of really upset people out there. And I work really hard to try to make their experience of calling the library special, and make sure they get routed correctly, make sure that they can hear me and I can hear them, and it's problematic. Today, though, I had a major breakthrough. In calling people in the building, I can't hear them. There's always this gap and stuff going on, but finally I figured out that if I step into like the other room and talk to them, that it works. So there's hope, but I agree with Sandy that we need to get staff to start talking about it, because it's recently come to my attention that there is an overwhelming dissatisfaction throughout the libraries with this system for both patrons and for staff, and it just hasn't yet reached the top that what we've got now is not working real well.
And perhaps you can work with management and get the specific questions that you need to ask of the patrons so that you can funnel the information and they can figure out what the technical issue is and resolve that.
Yes, we just started. I recently received an email asking about my experience, so I was able to get the information to the IT department about what I've been experiencing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nancy.
Just a suggestion to the members of the commission, which I also suggested to individual board of supervisors, and that is to just go into any library, anywhere, ask the staff how they like the telephone system. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving to item 13. Oh, were there any additional comments? Okay, moving to item 13. We have a application for appointment.
I move that the Library Commission appoint Armando Cruz as a new member of the Windsor Library Advisory Board. I met Armando last week. He's a senior at Windsor High School. He's very interested in the use of the library among the Spanish community, and he is going to work with us to see what we can do to pick that up.
Okay. So, second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor of the appointment?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, and that actually brings us to an end at a record 9:30, which is very exciting. The next regular meeting for the commission is our planning and budget workshop, February 25th, and it is going to be here at 9:30 in the morning.